Thanks, Carson. I want to get to questions as quickly as possible, but just want to echo what Carson says and say thank you. Like the bar is for a fan base as amazing as this one, and that's been one of the coolest things about being here for a couple of years in advance of this is just getting the field out a little bit, and everything that this fan base is about, which I'm still learning, but it's amazing, and the entire fan base is super locked in. Like I told a bunch of people, I've said it at some season ticket holder appearances, like there was never any question for me, despite some of the crowds we've had, whatever, about how much people care about this team. Said the reason that there were more empty seats than you like isn't because people stopped caring. It's just because they're pissed. And that we earn it, like it'll be there for us. And the bar to bring with what you guys bring to our fan base, because of how locked in the fan base already is, that bar is really high. And yet, like there's so much great stuff out there that I think whether it's positive or whether it challenges us, it brings our product to our fans, and B, it pushes us, it makes us better. Like all the attention, all the scrutiny, the level of detail, like brings out the best in us. And we appreciate that. Just like I know our players appreciate everything that the fans bring it out. So with that, I'll jump right into questions. I think you guys, whether we've met or not, hopefully you've gotten the impression from me that, I don't expect to be handled with kid gloves. Want to be as direct and honest as I can. So ask whatever. If I can't answer it, I won't. And looking forward to a good baseball conversation.
I was just water.
All right, leading off.
So, with all the young, good talent you have on the Cardinals, how do you know which players to start to negotiate the contract with Hurley?
We start with a softball.
How come now?
So, have you just said everything I said about candor? This is going to be an incredibly disappointing answer. I just never will talk about any specific player in this light. And not just because I'm trying to like keep things behind the curtain, but just because I think these things end up being really personal for guys. And to me, like, that's not something that I want to share for them. Like, they want to get into, obviously that's their right. I will say generally, like, when you talk about extensions for young players, like, I think these get portrayed as like we're reporting as, right? And yeah, like obviously we have to have belief in the player, and also belief in the person. But it's also like, it's a risk sharing arrangement, right? When a player starts his career, the risk's all on him. And when we enter into one of these agreements, we're sharing that risk with the player. And we're sort of going into an arrangement to kind of do this together. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. And even when everybody wants it, still figuring out the right time, the right terms doesn't always come together. Sometimes it does, and those are great. But, really for me, it's more obviously belief in the player and belief in the person as far as who do you like first. Let me see it up. What else we got?
You're in kind of a unique position because in the last 8 seasons, you worked in a senior front office role for a large market, a small market, and now a relatively medium-sized market. There's been a lot of talk about CBA negotiations this week. There's been some push for a salary cap amongst owners and fans. I'm just curious, do you feel like baseball needs a salary cap to progress into the next collective bargaining agreement?
Not another easy question. You guys are going to just not believe me when I'm like, man, I'll just be super candid with you. Some baselines that they're so above my K grade. Look, I think if it is a real thing that there are disparities in this game that just are getting bigger, I think everybody knows that. It's actually said something to me that literally like every group that I've spoken to, fans, media, whomever, and everybody has this on their minds. And so it's obviously something that everybody who cares about the team notices. We notice it too. And I do think it's something like we can't just pretend that it exists. And as an industry, I think we got to think creatively about how to make everybody happy, but also make sure that, the game is really more of a contest of excellence rather than just a contest of resources. And there's a lot of different ways that you can really get real about that. got a lot of different things on my plate. I'm pretty happy that figuring out exactly what that is now one of them. But hopefully, I know it's a topic this year. Hopefully there is some creativity, willingness to work through, get back and forth to figure that out. But one thing that's also important to me on this subject, regardless of that, like within our baseball operation, it can never be an excuse. It can never be an obstacle. Like you focus on it as a reason why we can't accomplish our goals. And I think that is the benefit of some of the experience that I had during my time at the Rays, is that, we were aware of some of those disparities and some of the disadvantages that it put us in. We also found some advantages that our situation gave us that were unique to our organization and that we could weaponize and that we could lean into to try to win. And to be like every organization is going to get where they want to go by figuring out who they are and being the best version of themselves. And it's on us to do that. There's obviously a lot of breadcrumbs to that. When you look at the history of the Cardinals, it's not something the Cardinals had done. It has to be a little new and a little different every time you want to do it again. So we can't ever, like, that is just not something that we can use as an excuse, but it is a reality. And it will mean that they're going to be, like, best version of us is not going to look like the best version of us. I need to stop, which that's okay. We just need to stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish. And albeit we're aware of it is an issue for the industry, it is an issue for the industry. A lot of you have a lot of different thoughts about how to address that. You got to focus on rotating us here.
Maybe I can ask you an easier question. I wanted to ask you about Joe Douglas and Jacob Buffa, two names that were brought into the organization in the offseason. Two guys, since you've taken over, you've really been about bringing in outside voices into the Cardinals. And I think one of the primary complaints about the Cardinals over the years is they became too insular and too, thinking through one like line and tunnel. What have those two names specifically, Joe Douglas and Jacob Buffa, brought to the organization since their implementation? And then what is, like, you guys are still continuing to lean into like the scouting element and having more scouts out there, whereas across the league maybe they're going away from that. Can you kind of talk about that element that you think is going to give the Cardinals an added edge as you guys continue to kind of drive this back?
Yeah, really good question. Good topic. So the first thing I would say is, it's pretty obvious just from both, I think I've said it, but also just seeing the things that he done since I've been here, that I did feel coming in here, kind of getting to look around, that the organization really would benefit from some fresh faces, some new ideas, hopefully some new ideas, period, but certainly some ideas that might be new here, and that was going to be a good way to move us forward. Now, also, like, there are wonderful, wonderful people here, and the success that the organization has enjoyed over the past couple of decades is not an accident. And, it was very apparent early on, like just meeting the people I met here, some of whom I knew from outside the organization, but many I did in part because there wasn't a lot of traffic in and out. So it's not like you are necessarily likely to have worked with a lot of the folks who've been here because they've been here for a while. But very apparent, like, we do not have a work ethic issue here. We don't have a character issue. The character issue here is wonderful people in this organization. And this organization has been responsible for many of the innovations and new ideas over the last 25 years that have moved the industry forward. In fact, as you've heard me say, like, I actually think that is the biggest sort of common thread of the last 100 years of the Cardinals, is this organization, more than any other, has always set the standard. It's just that's always changing, so now we got to go set it again. I say that all because I didn't view this as like, hey, new people are better than the people who are here. That's not what this is about. It's just that I think for us to get where we want to go and have the best chance at success, it would be helpful to bring in, besides me, other fresh eyes and different thoughts, but with people that share the values and will be additive to the culture that's here and help build on what people will here and have accomplished. So you mentioned a couple of people that we brought in, very, very different people. And obviously this was on the heels of, and they're not the only new people that joined us this offseason. This was on the heels of a lot of the people with the player development and performance. That was my responsibility last year. And it's been cool. I mean, what you hope is that everybody's bringing best practices and knowledge from the places that they've been, but also willing to push themselves beyond just that. Wherever you are, whether it's here or somewhere else, like, the best of what you'd experience can just be what you're able to copy paste that you used to here. Like, you have to be going to be open to people around you and cool all those ideas and challenge each other and hopefully come up with something that's better that you've been, because if all we can do is reproduce what other organizations are doing, that's it. Like, you're just going to be sort of like a knockoff version of a bunch of other places that we got to be able to push each other. And one of the cool things for me, as someone who at this point has been in the industry for a while, is I've learned so much over the last couple of years from people, whether I've worked with most of the people we brought in, I haven't worked. And they've pushed me, and there's things that I've come to view differently just because of some of the things I've been exposed to, or some of the ways that people have challenged me. And it's been great for me, and I hopefully great for the organization, or I'm hoping that that continues. So speaking specifically, Joe and Jacob, I think what I saw, very, very different people, different sort of mandates here, like with Jacob, core bringing back Hull, but someone who you could say, okay, we're gonna put somebody in the international scouting group, has zero experience in the space, and doesn't speak Spanish. Great idea, though. But he does have a lot of really relevant experience, I think, where we can take our international acquisition efforts next. And in particular, the background in both player development and coming originally to that space as a performance guy. When you think about what we're doing on the international acquisition side, like, those guys are the farthest away from the big leagues of any player we acquire. So therefore, a lot of how we can differentiate ourselves in that space is so much of it is a physical bet, just as much as it is a baseball skill bet, because you're talking about what these guys are 50 and 10 years, and there's still advantages to be gained in terms of how we could separate those guys at the ages that we scout them, and to from a performance angle in terms of physically where their bodies could go. And so having someone with that background to be able to help us implement things on the ground that can help our selection process there was really appealing. He's also been someone who he is kind of a self-starter, kind of figure it out guy, which that's as close as the Wild West I think you still have in our sport, and it helps to have that ability to just be in different spaces, whether you've been in them or not. Like, his career pattern has been very unique and very cool, and thought he would be a great addition to that area, and that would be a neat way to get him here and to let him impact our organization. I'm really excited he's here. And, Joe, our pro side, we had this group of pro scouts who I would say, when we look at the number of them and the amount of reports that they churn out in a given year, there's probably no harder working group of pro scouts in baseball, where I think we needed to go in order to really be with the industry standard on a pro evaluation side, is basically not just have those scouts kind of sending in reports, but have it be a little more interactive in terms of them understanding a little bit more about how that information can impact a decision, especially in an age where you have so much objective information. We still have a lot of work to do to ask them the right questions, so that we're not asking them questions that have been asked 5, 10, 15 years ago that we now have objective information to tell us. Not that this is I'll give you an example, just as like this isn't an actual thing that we needed to change, but it's a sort of evasive example of that. When my career started, one of the main things that scouts did was roll into minor league ballparks with radar guns, tell you how hard the guys are. We don't need to do that. We have every pitch. So then it became, what other questions can we ask these guys? Well, now we're entering a time when we don't just know how hard everybody's throwing. We know ball flight, batted ball flight. We have bat tracking. We're starting to get more and more arcless motion capture, hitters, pitchers, players moving on the field. So we want to make sure that our experts, with their eyes and their networks and the information that they can get, that they're actually staying ahead of that information that we're getting objectively, even as that information continues to advance. And then how do we put that together with all the other info we had to get to a evaluation, to get to the decision, and turn it into a little more of a holistic process than I think the way that the industry used to evaluate. So that's a big part of what Joe's helping us put out.
And building on culture, which is such a buzzword in sports, and you're incorporating that technology into a player, how much do you figure in the ability of this guy to meet the standard to turn into a player-led organization?
Let me ask you to, can you elaborate on that when you say, like, meet the standard, player-led?
Well, is there ever a situation you're just like, well, we grade him at an 80, him at an 80? We could see where this could be a cultural clash and he may be at 65. Does that exist?
Yeah, I think it's hard to know in advance.
Yeah.
And I think we need to try to assess that. And we should also have a good deal of humility in terms of just how much is actually knowable. because guys can be different in different situations. Like I've been in my career, been part of situations where we thought we knew everything about the player and we got burned.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say who it was, but 2 organizations ago, I remember we acquired somebody in a trade that we thought we had done our homework on, and we got this incredible intel on, and this guy's great, blah, 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 and then just wasn't that with us. Now, it's that when the intel was wrong? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it was very specific to the situation that he was in, and it wasn't wrong there, and it just didn't click. And then sometimes guys will surprise you where, you know, there are players that sometimes these players get moved because their organization believes, this guy's soft. Well, maybe he was just in a bad situation, or maybe he needed a change of scenery. There are players that you can see, you look at that, you feel like, man, this guy is just beaten down where he is, but we could get him out of there. Both other places I've been, there's some acquisitions that we made where we felt like we were getting players that were huge change of scenery candidates. In fact, part of what I think it's been really cool to see the staff motivated by this. Like, we didn't want Jordan Walker to become one of those guys where he has to go somewhere else for it to work. And some of that involved like deep breath on everybody's part and just try to leave some of the things in the past. But, you know, that's part of what we pride ourselves as an organization on, is being able to get the most out of guys, understanding that we're all human. And sometimes there's things about certain mix or where a guy's at certain points in his life and his career. Like, I wouldn't want to be considered that pay everything that I was at 18 or 21 or 25 or 43 for that matter is what I'm always going to be. Like, you like to think that you grow and change and push yourself and be different. So yes, that is a big part of it. I do think we didn't have those guys. You talking about the question about long-term deals. That's a big part of it. Can I put my head on the pillow or feel good about who's walking in here the next day? That's a huge part of it. Will I still feel that way after the guy's got a pile of money? That's a huge part of it. But, you know, you also have to recognize, like, sometimes we can misjudge those things. Yeah. This is really hard what these guys are doing at a point in their lives when most people aren't under this type of scrutiny. The ones that can carry that burden from day one, that do it effortlessly, are special. Not everyone does, but that doesn't mean that they won't click in the right situation with the right kind of care. Our job is to bring the best out of everybody. And so we can't ever feel like we have somebody all figured out.
Well, you can feel the positivity without a doubt in the way that you approach that. Are you happy where you are right now, being kind of in the off the radar to figurehead now? You think it's in a great spot?
You mean like the organization?
Yeah.
Or, it's not really my nature to feel that way.
Gotcha.
I still feel like we have so much work left to do. Cool. That's motivated. That's part of what I love about doing this. And, you know, it's cool. Hey, we've gotten off to this good start, but this is not a goal. Like, we have not accomplished a damn thing. And even, it doesn't matter if we win the next 10 in a row, lose the next 10 in a row. Like, we're trying to set that standard. It's really hard. Everybody else is trying to do the same thing. Everybody's competing tooth and nail to do this. So I think the objective reality is that we're not anywhere close to where we really need to be. But also, like, the way I'm wired, I just will probably never feel that way. But that is, to me, that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it is like, you're in a zero-sum competition. We put something on the line every day. Most of the stuff that we do, us non-athletes, we have some athletes in our front office, but I'm not one of them. Most of what we do unfolds over a longer period of time. It's not just about tonight's game, but you sort of feel like something's on the line every day. But you know, like, you're competing against hundreds of other people that you're trying to do the same thing. Like, one thing I constantly preach to our staff, I think I've said it publicly a few times, like, we are so privileged to be able to do what we do. Most of us, there's 29 other people that get to do it. Like, that's our competition, is wake up every day, go kick their ass. We'll never really know if you did it, but, like, if that's your goal, what does that mean you got to get out of today? And if you ever lose that edge, it's just like you put a timer on yourself so you get.
Han, can you speak to the decision to add Jimmy Crooks to the roster this week and how it's impacting the catching dynamic? And then in general, can you zoom out and talk about that dynamic between the coaching staff and front office to value who should be on the 26-man roster to help today, but also the long-term trajectory of a player and how you balance both of those things at the same time?
Yeah, good questions. Obviously, they kind of relate to each other in this particular case. So, you know, with Jimmy, this is obviously something that we're hoping everybody would excel and he would just kind of knock the door down. And he's done a lot of things in that direction. I don't know that we could ever say decisively that the player has accomplished every single thing they could possibly accomplish at AAA. But in terms of the things that we laid out for him, both in the offseason, even as the season was going on, he was executing on all of them. Like, he made such great strides last year in terms of his ability to handle a staff, just understand the responsibilities, the preparation that had to come with that role. There's a lot made of, I think rightly so, some of what we were hopefully able to do for Ivan and what Ivan was able to take advantage of to make progress in that area with some of the resources that we now had available to him. But I think Jimmy was just as big of a beneficiary last year, just because we had now the structure and the personnel to be able to build a program and hold it accountable to it. And again, when we talk about some of the new things we're doing down below, that's not to throw stones at the people who are here trying to execute on. There's just only so much you can hope to do if you don't have people with clear responsibility for aspects of the program that own it and that are charged with doing it. And we were able to hold Jimmy to a standard last year that he then rose and met. That got even better this year. I went in there at the end of April. We had Yachty in there a couple weeks ago, spent some time in there. Pretty good to have Yachty able to audit a catcher's meeting and tell us if the guys are dialed, right? Like, you're not going to find anyone better to say, like, this guy's ready for it. And he just continued to progress in that regard. And then offensively, I think some of the impact quality gains that he's made this year are real. Obviously, there was a lot of swing and miss, a lot of chase there, that he has moved in the right direction. His level's tough here. We know that they know what he's done well and what he's struggled with, and they're going to pitch him accordingly. But he had done enough, we thought, to really merit an opportunity. It just, we felt like where we were team-wise, we were in a good spot to do it. Obviously, a good problem to have. Right, Ellis is somebody who we really value and who our pitchers really value, and does a lot of things both that you can see and a lot that you can't. Pushes him into a smaller role. In Pedro, he's been an incredible pro about it, as you would expect, which is cool. And he knows there's ways he's going to be able to help even when he's not playing. And there's also things he can work on that he's motivated to get better at, that's easier to work on when you're not trying to prepare to handle a staff that night. We were just talking about that earlier today. So just trying to remember the second part of your question, because this is actually, I think, important in terms of like working with the staff to navigate that. One of the really cool things about where this dynamic has been is that our staff's been, at least felt to me, and I understand in this chair, if people are like, man, I don't like this, I don't like what this guy's doing, they're probably not going to walk up to me and tell me, but just being around these guys for a couple of years, again, it's one of the advantages of getting to know them, is that they've just been really bought in on what we're trying to do. That doesn't mean we agree on everything, but Ollie's been an amazing partner in that, and in just figuring out both how do we hold that standard of, hey, like, I try to lay it out as clearly as I can. Like, we have to think of this as a longer term thing, but that doesn't mean we don't want to beat you tonight. That doesn't mean we're not walking to the building, working to win and expecting to win tonight. And as much as possible, how can we have those things work in harmony? Well, there are some decisions, and sometimes this is just going to be on me from my chair, that you have to expect someone in my chair to be able to do that or enforce it in a sense better than the coaches are on a given day. But how do we position the roster to where we are moving towards that long-term goal, where we can really look at, as much as possible, we can look at every spot on that roster and say, like, we're pushing ourselves towards where we want to be, but that also we get a chance to take a step there tonight. And I think this is something that actually could check both boxes. Like, you could argue that even if we were just optimizing for the month of June, that we would want to give Jimmy a shot. But we also know at his age and with his ability that he's someone that could be a big part of this for a long time. So it's cool to give us enough hope.
Can you?
Really quickly, guys, let's just continue to raise our hands just so everybody had an opportunity to ask their questions.
Can you speak to potential other roster moves that you might have to make in the coming months, and how you balance that with the clubhouse, and like if the team continues to stay in contention, like what the thought process is behind potential moves like that, and maybe like an explanation for fans who might not be happy with some of the tough decisions that might have to be made in a few months.
Well, I mean, part of what we sign up for in this is tough decisions. Like, yeah, it goes with what I was saying before. Like, I want to be in that position. Like, there's zero part of this that was like hoping we would not be in that position. You want the decisions to be tough. You want to be playing well. You want to have a lot of good players and good options that you have to choose from. And hopefully when you have that the other 29 clubs recognize that, and people come knocking on your door for your players, and you have some things to think about. That's where we want to be. So I hope we're in that situation. Like, I don't want to, obviously it's hard to talk about at this point, and the best way I can say it is like that's just going to continue to be our goal, is basically everything we do, whether it's this year, whether it's on field, whether it's infrastructure, it could be some of the stuff we talked about in international scouting, it can be information. Like, the goal is to win as many World Series as possible. How do we do that? By putting ourselves in a position where we're perennial contenders. So that just has to be where our eye is. Like, that include, like, we could take a step towards that tonight as soon as this rain gets out of here. But that there's also a long-term goal of making sure we're in a position to do that for a good long while. So that just has to be kind of front of mind. That can mean so many different things. And I expect and kind of hope, in a sense, that there are things that we might have a chance to do, that we might decide to do, that not everybody in this room is going to agree with. I think when that happens, it's just my responsibility to lay out the logic as much as possible, or connect it to that roadmap. Like, I think hopefully the roadmap is clear. Now we can then argue and disagree or agree on, like, are the moves pushing us towards that roadmap? But I think that's really my job, is, to make those decisions and then to be able to articulate how they help us toward where we want to go.
Trying to bounce around here. Could you speak from both the major league and minor league perspective as to the things that have stood out to you the most this year from the time that players were making their way into camp?
Yeah. There's a wide range of questions, so we're trying to zero in a few different things. I mean, from the major league side, I think the biggest thing, again, like, obviously hopefully last night we were able to regular sugar a little bit, coming out of a tough week, but record aside, like, I think the record sort of validates a lot of the things that we really wanted to have happen with this group culture. And that part had been really full, really gratifying. Certainly for me personally, I hope for the Bowl organization. We spent at least as much time talking about culture and identity and how we go about our business, and it's been training both internally with your front office, Ollie, the staff, and then Ollie with the players. We spent a ton of time on that. Obviously, we also spent time baseball skill and all the things that go into developing our players to be their best. But I think that stuff matters. I think it's real, and there's an identity that we were hoping these guys would step into, and they have to be the ones that do it. Or their standard is their story. They're the ones that are going to do it. So you don't know exactly how it's going to work, but I think by and large, right, they have felt that they get it, and they're showing you what that is, and that effort being there, and just that relentlessness. And it gets back to what we were talking about, that there is this thing when you talk about it being a long-term project, people sort of from their ends, there would be the way you get sure that that's not an approach that we could ever have. And Frank said, us in our jobs, we have to have the approach of, like, I'm going to kick some ass today. And that's how we get wherever we want to go. But our players certainly need to have that approach and just not care about any of that other stuff in this bubble song. I'm doing it today, and they've done an amazing job of that. So you can point to individual successes. You can look at some individuals, talk about some people, well, they'll do better. But this is a group that now starting to hopefully just come this week. But anyway, and I think we're on our way there. That's the really beautiful, as we spent a lot of time on that. I think throughout the minor leagues, what was cool for me, like last year, we had more changes on the pitching side of lighter. We brought in Spooky on the hitting side this year. So senior pitching are now up gear too. And seeing a lot of things that Man and Reeves just getting to know each other last year. It started stand-up series on the fly. We hadn't really got that point yet, where there's a bunch of ideas really deep in mind and sort of feel Rushing's influence at the best version of what they could. And if you're one of it, he's had a lot of progress. You could see there's some success stories last year. But now things becoming like a program, a process, and like you phase. These be like the real, if you really want to dominate this, you can, or sort of stealing this concept from Sir, trying to get this real, like anybody should be able to run like an A+ play on one guy. But where we really separate ourselves, essentially, we take
do it up the sister, where we could do that cross 165 players plus our guys. I'm not selling you with dairy. Only we are, but I think we're now seeing what that could look like both on the baseball skill side, the performance side, where we talk about, okay, we got 165 guys, we should have 165 prep routines, we should have 100 player plans. Like, not telling you we're all the way there, but I think we're starting to feel as an organization or a site to with that. We're going to take steps along that way to see some payoff, having it turn from like all these process things, turning from homework into like, hey, this is what we do to help players. And the more you see that start to pick up some momentum, that is fixable. So, yeah.
Just with your experience in Boston, and I think Boston and St. Louis, they're probably hard pressed to find two organizations that don't pride themselves so much in their past. I mean, you're talking about making these difficult decisions and of having to kind of move people. Is that like past and historical value? And I read the players on the wall here with other jackets. Is that part of the thing that keeps people in their position? Is it tough to break away from that history to go forward saying that was then, but this is now? And is that difficult to convince people with that? He's in the majority. It can be.
It can. There's no question about it. It's kind of tough for me because I'm actually like a huge baseball history nerd. Like, I love this shit. But, so, like, I like to think that for somebody my age, I can appreciate it much as anybody. I think it's been a little easier for me to see here. Maybe some of that's the benefit of that experience. Maybe it's just being more off to the side coming into this organization and not have a chance to look around. But, go back to what I said earlier about like this organization sensed the standard. And I think that's a real thing. And to me, the best way we honor that history is by not just trying to like rinse and people. It's by trying to figure out what's X, because that's what all those guys get. I mean, I talked about it, but like greatest innovation in the history of baseball, in my view, is the abandoning farm system this happy year. And then it just became what everybody did because it worked. And now everybody, when they talk about George Kissel, like, granted, I never worked with, got to meet one time. But, I know some of the things that he did. He's not a legend because he was just doing what everybody else did. He did a lot of things differently to move that standard forward. He thought about it. I'm guessing he wouldn't have articulated it this way decades ago, but he was probably in some sense like thinking in systems, right? Because it was about how do we build this player relevance history to where we're holding all of our players to the highest and standard of detail. How do we force that across the whole system? And how do we find different phases that people tell me stories? I got to speak for some different alumni of the organization, including some people still affiliated with the organization, about some of the stuff that I've been thought of, done, tried over history. So to sit here and think that like everything is just this sort of old school, whatever, like we think of it as old school because it worked and everybody tried to copy it and then it just became extant. But that's really how we win, is to try to continue to make progress on that. And it doesn't mean we're throwing out what came before us. It just means I think we're trying to honor that by moving it forward just like they. And that's probably not something that I would have thought of the same way, 5 or 6 years ago. But I do think that is part of the responsibility. It's the same thing for our players. Like they walk in this building all the time and pictures of legends of the organization on the walls. Like those guys didn't get up on those walls by being timid about who they were or how they were going to go about. They went out there, they set their own standard, and that's what we all have to do with Brad to me, is how we honor this game for us. Here for us, this going to be here after us. But you get a chance to write a chapter. I think that's the way we are.
Last season, we saw pitching was the focus at the trade deadline, the draft for those off-season trades. You keep talking for looking long term. As we see the positions of need that's now, how are you going to look at that for? It might be a need now, but we're looking at 2 or 3 years down the road as you're looking at and some moves for this season, the draft come out.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, we do have to think about that. We're not just trying to amass the most player value, right? We're trying to build teams. At the same time, this past winter, it wasn't like we necessarily set out to say, man, we just got to get a whole bunch of pitching. Obviously, looking at this, felt that, first of all, you can never have enough. Second, high-end pitching, pitching that can dominate October. you want to give yourself as many chances for that as you could possibly get, and guys that you can realistically see having a path to that. But, some of it's just kind of how it falls of where you think you would get the most talent. When you're doing something like what we did this winter, where we were making a lot of deals that were bringing a lot of down the road value into the organization. So it wasn't necessarily like, hey, we just need to focus on pitching. Hopefully we appreciated the talent enough and we're able to maximize the talent you're getting. Now, that's it. Having done that, you still want to make sure all the puzzle pieces fit. The further away they are, the less you have to think about that, right? We got room for a lot of players. As long as they're not actually blocking off opportunity for somebody in the system, we can accommodate talent. We just want to get as much talent as we can. Like, that's the approach you take to the draft, right? But you go trade for a draft pick, it's the ultimate, like, this could be anybody, right? And in the draft, you're really just trying to maximize the talent first and foremost. And then when you think about guys getting closer and closer to the big leagues, now we do think about, okay, we feel pretty good about this position for the next X number of years. We feel pretty good about that position. This guy has some versatility. We can do different things. What do we want to go out and get? And that is a real thing that we do constantly and that we do each and every year, is we're trying to build feeds. So certainly having brought a lot of high-end pitching, thanks to organization, probably tilts you a little more naturally towards the position player side. But at the end of the day, if we see a chance to get someone that we think can be elite for us, like, we're going to want to be aggressive, even if we feel like we're adding to the surplus.
Yeah, Jordan Walker called to be the biggest question mark in the season come on the organization, and he has obviously been an expansion to our starting year. How can the ascension of a guy like him change your outlook of the next 3 to 5 years?
I'll tell you why I sort of took a deep breath, pause. I think one of the coolest things about what we've seen to this point for Jordan, obviously now we're 2 months in, right? So every day, it's I don't want to say it never was real, but every day you sort of have to think about that as like, we've established a new baseline here. But this didn't happen because anybody was thinking like that. It happened just because, like, the work quality was there, the preparation was there was commitment, everybody to a process, just everybody was aligned around that. Like, anybody who tells you they saw the first 2 weeks of the season coming, like, I don't buy it. I didn't. But we thought the work quality is really good. Like, we had a lot of belief in that, which I think you guys heard as we were talking about the opening day roster and why he was here. Like, he talked about that all spring, and even as the results weren't there, our feel that, we weren't BSing. Like, it was real, the work that was happening. Now, was it going to flip the script for, like, literally, like, game 2 or game 3 or whatever that was, and then just take off? Like, I don't think we can see that coming. But that came because just everybody had their head down doing it. And for us to say, okay, that's over, now we can just chalk this up as a success and, change the outlook or whatever, and, like, mission accomplished, what's next? Like, he's not going to think that way. We can't think that way. Like, the really good ones don't think that way. They just go about the work every day. They try to get better, learn from it, flip schedule to the next day, and then go about the right preparation that day. So I think that for us to take a different approach, but that we probably wouldn't be honoring what got us here. And all that being said, to the extent that you have somebody who breaks out and establishes this as an all-star caliber player, for us to get where we want to go, we're going to need a few guys to do that on both sides of the ball over time. So it obviously does move us forward, but I also think you shouldn't really be trying to think that way. Yeah, there's a part where, especially for my seat, where you zoom out and you look at, okay, how do we build out this roster? We're certainly looking at right field a little differently than there's a range of outcomes for how that might look like at this point, and we're living a really good one. But, I don't want us as an organization to take our foot off the gas in terms of we got here by trying to come by it honestly, trying to do the right thing, get here, and we should not let up.
So, I've been up here about 35 minutes. We still got a little bit of time left. We are scheduled to start at 6:15, and just so you know that as well. So, if you have some questions, we'll have time for a couple more, but we got about 7 or 8 minutes.
That should be forward thinking. And I have ideas. One the rough, so we should do that. Or maybe that either off fuel or dissect.
Yeah, great topic. Candidly, we still have some work to figure out how to leverage this really well. I I think this is one of those things where, it's actually in some ways it's a little scary, not just because I think that I don't see how this doesn't end with the robots killing her and enslaving. Like I just don't see how it ends any other way. I just feel like, I become a battery for a sheet. I'd like to add a little series ring on my finger. So until that happens, we want to try to do everything we can to leverage it to win. But this is one of those things that, first of all, I'm aware of the fact that I'm now at a point in my life where I'm like old enough that this is never going to feel native to me. It's sort of a sobering thought because it didn't feel like that long ago where like I wasn't that generation, either in this business or in the world. So when that happens, you have to push yourself a little harder to get out of some of the teams that you built. What I've gleaned from some of the research I've done is that it really, I think, right now it can really be like a force multiplier for really talented people to kind of scale themselves. And when we talk about the competition that we're in, I like to think of this as, it's not me versus Jed or Matt Arnold, whatever. It's like our couple hundred people versus his couple hundred people versus his couple hundred people. Well, if we're using this well, it's going to feel like a lot more than that because we can scale our work better. I think where you get in trouble with it right now is where you just try to offload stuff to or no due diligence. Like we're not there yet. Maybe we'll get there eventually. So there still needs to be, much like with all of the predictive models that, I've been lucky enough to leverage over the last decade plus in my career. If you think that you're just going to be able to throw stuff at this and just take the output or come with it, probably going to get gated by someone who has a really good process for due diligence around that output. So I think AI is not different. It just can take it to a whole other level, and it can really multiply the work of people very quick. Yeah.
Do you think barbecue sauce should go in hot dog? I mean, America's a free country, man. Do whatever you want.
Like, personally, like I would not say I would. It wouldn't be the first thing.
Okay, yeah. I appreciate it.
Spit out. You guys should try it. It's good. It's good. But like, you do you, man. It's yes.
Will you change how your George Gracie defines in that in not to no close to that?
It's hard to answer in the abstract because I think so much of that, like any of the decisions we make, it's really more about the specifics. I do think it's where you can get in trouble on these things is by just being overly reactive to like what just happened. Like, you try to be as forward-looking as you can with all this stuff about where we headed, how do these players fit, is this a good investment for the organization? So there are scenarios where what happens this season could meaningfully impact that one way or another, is how we look at ourselves going forward. But at the same time, whatever happens this season, we go back to 0 wins. So all that matters when you're bringing players into the organization is what are they going to do next? How are they going to help us get where we want to go? And so we shouldn't, in my view, overemphasize what just happened. We really have to be forward looking. Now, I think we're built in such a way that, it would be hard for us to accomplish something like that this season without a lot of core players taking the steps forward just because we are so young, which is one of the cool things about the success that we're having now. But at the same time, you got to recognize like we all start from 0 every year, and all that matters is what's going to happen next when you're adding you guys. So as much as possible, we only want to lean on what just happened insofar as it's going to help us figure out what's next.
Coming to piggyback a little bit on Kyle's question about the potential labor, problems going into the off season. I've heard you speak a lot about, looking for opportunity, always making sure you're taking phone calls to understand what opportunities are out there. Do you think that kind of uncertainty offers an opportunity, whether it's looking to lock up certain pieces of the core or add pieces to the roster?
It could. It's hard to know what motivates everybody, whether teams or players, when they're thinking about decisions that they have to make. And, I think sometimes if you see opportunities there, like you at least want to ask yourself, why are people behaving the way that they do? Could it have something to do with how they're thinking about that? But I think from our end, this comes up every few years, right? When there's a CBA is up, could there be changes? What might they look like? What might they look like? There are always opportunities that emerge in that. But at the same time, like the fundamentals of what makes a good organization and what's winning baseball, like those change over time. They don't usually change, I think, because of the CBA. They might change because of different ways people figure out to win in this game. But, you know, you probably are getting too cute if you start to get too far away from the things that just make good organizations. So, yeah, you always want to be as opportunistic as you can. But I think, you know, we don't want to get too cute with respect to that. Just try to keep the main thing.
Is there anything that you have learned in the 2 years that you've been here that you wish you knew at one of the other jobs?
Oh man, so many. We were on enough time.
Pick your baby.
You know, you could almost divide this into two different buckets. Like I said, I've been fortunate to be exposed to some different things, particularly in the player development and the performance realm in particular.
I think we talked about this when I was on Will's podcast. I think we might have talked about some of the performance stuff, but right?
Said this at some point. So we, you know, some of that is just like, okay, there are X's and O's of how you build programs and how you think about programming for players that I definitely view differently. You know, I think like on the performance end, I was probably spent, you know, and I might be wrong now, I don't know, but I've probably spent a lot of my career in a mindset of thinking it mostly through a lens of just thinking of it through injury prevention and workload management and risk mitigation. Don't get me wrong, those things are really important. But there's also this aspect of like, how do we really sync up what we're doing in the general space, like off the field, training room, weight room? How do we sync that all up, especially thinking about movement? That's not an area that was my background naturally, and thinking about how that aligns with what we're doing out on the field and really how do we merge those things. It's been a huge organizational emphasis for us. I think there's a lot there. I think there's still a ton of opportunity there in our industry to do that well. So that's definitely something I think differently about. And then there are also just some things where, you know, to me, like the biggest blessing of kind of being off to the side for a little while was just you have time to stop and think about some things that you really don't when you're carrying around as much responsibility as comes with these jobs. And I love that responsibility. It was not a blessing that I asked for, but it turned out to be a blessing to have just time to think about that. And it's the same thing that I ask everybody that I work with, including our players, like, don't be content where you are today. Reflect, think about ways you might handle things differently, how you might get better, how you push yourself to get better. You know, there's so much you can't control in this game. We all know that, but just how do you handle the different things that come at you? That's something I like to think that I think differently now.
Let's do one last question in the Bearvac corner.
Yeah. Is there any plans to move Devon to a different position or the primary state as a pitcher? Like,
We like where we're at now with this balance. You know, this was, and I think it's actually really cool. I mean, there's obviously, I think people have different opinions on this, right? So you're talking about potentially moving into a different position. You know, we get the questions of, hey, why isn't he catching more? You know, we came up with this because we wanted to position him for success, knowing he had more under him from catching standpoint. And also, he's played every game, and we walk in there every game. And there's only so much you could put on a guy behind the plate expecting to still do that. Even Yachty did not do that every single game. He did it almost every single game, but they don't make him like that. That was an anomaly, and like most guys aren't like that. So having his that lineup every day has been a huge emphasis. And we just like where it's at right now. I mean, look, you never know where time takes people. You know, he's up for a lot, and he's willing to push himself. But you know, we'll love the way this is working out right now.
Yeah, I really like how you full frame it. Do you feel like when players play TH, they see any offensive talent grade because they're on the fielder beginning?
I can't have there's evidence to back that up that does happen. And then you look at some guys that manage it differently, that learn to manage it differently, and he, you know, that might be something he's going through, but also there's only so much you can infer from a small sample.
He's still really well with the Jim.
Yeah, he knows his own. He knows strike zone. It's cool.
Well, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you all.